The sheriff's sirens broke the early morning silence as deputies raced down the gravel driveway to the Bennett farm. Rachel sat on the front porch, her arms wrapped protectively around Ellie and Emma, a heavy blanket draped over their tiny shoulders. The girls were too weak to stand. Their clothes hung in tatters and they shivered despite the blanket. Tom arrived moments later, tires skidding on the wet earth, his face drained of color when he saw the twins. He stumbled forward, fell to his knees and gathered them into his arms, tears streaking his weathered cheeks. I thought you were gone," he whispered hoarsely. Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Her relief was sharp and overwhelming, but beneath it stirred a colder, darker fear. What had happened to her daughters? What was this nightmare they had somehow survived? Sheriff Dalton, a broad-shouldered man with a grizzled beard and steady eyes, approached carefully. "Rachel, Tom, we'll need to take the girls to the hospital. They need a full medical exam. And then," he lowered his voice, eyes flicking toward the girls, "then we'll need to ask them what happened." Rachel's grip tightened. "They've been through enough." "I know." Dalton crouched down, speaking gently. "But we need to find out who did this, before he hurts someone else." Ellie stirred. She looked up at the sheriff with haunted eyes. "He's still watching." Dalton's jaw tightened. "Who, sweetheart? Who's watching?" But Ellie only pressed her face into Rachel's side and wouldn't speak another word. The hospital room smelled sterile and cold. Machines beeped softly as doctors examined the girls, checking for malnutrition, dehydration, and signs of trauma. Astonishingly, despite their thinness and bruises, both girls were alive. Weak, but alive. "It's a miracle," Dr. Patel murmured. 5 months missing in winter, and they survived. Rachel stood by the bed, one hand on each of her daughters. "They said someone kept them from coming back." Patel frowned. "We'll need to involve a child psychologist. They've been through a severe ordeal." A knock sounded at the door. Sheriff Dalton entered, accompanied by a young woman in a gray blazer. "This is Agent Kara Simmons, FBI. She's joining the investigation." Rachel's stomach clenched. "FBI?" Dalton nodded. "Given the time they were missing and the circumstances, it's bigger than local law enforcement." Agent Simmons approached the bed and crouched to meet the girl's eyes. She had a calm, warm presence, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Ellie, Emma, I know you're scared, but you're safe now. No one can hurt you here." The girls glanced at each other. Ellie spoke first, her voice barely audible. "He found us when we were hiding." Rachel leaned forward. "Who, baby?" "The man in the dark." Emma nodded, her lips trembling. "He was in the barn. We never saw his face. He wore black clothes. His voice was scratchy, like he couldn't breathe right." Simmons scribbled something in a small notebook. "What did he do after he found you?" "He took us somewhere," Ellie said. "It was really cold and smelled bad, like old water." Emma added, "He made us stay in a room with no windows. We couldn't tell if it was day or night." Rachel's heart twisted. Her babies had been trapped in darkness for months. Simmons asked gently, "How did you get back to the barn?" Ellie's brow furrowed. "Sometimes he wasn't there. We tried to open the door, but it was locked. Then a few days ago, he just didn't come back." "We waited," Emma whispered, "but he never came. So we found a way out. We ran and ran. We got lost. We came back to the barn to hide. We thought he might be following." Dalton and Simmons exchanged a grim look. "How did you eat?" Simmons asked softly. Ellie hesitated. "He gave us food, sometimes canned stuff, crackers." Rachel felt sick. Some monster had kept her daughters alive, just enough to prolong their suffering. "But why?" Dalton stood. "I want to sweep the barn again. If he had access to the property once, he might have left traces." Tom spoke for the first time since they arrived at the hospital. His voice was tight with controlled fury. "We're coming with you." The barn felt different now, tainted. Rachel could almost feel the dark memories trapped in the wood and shadows. Deputies combed through every corner while Simmons directed a forensic team. Rachel stood back, arms crossed tightly, while Tom followed the sheriff into the hay storage area. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, Dalton muttered. But Simmons wasn't satisfied. She walked the perimeter, flashlight slicing through the dim interior. Her beam landed on the spot where the hay bale had shifted. "Here," she said. The deputies moved in, pulling away the remaining hay. Behind the bales was more than just the narrow gap Rachel had found. A small trapdoor lay hidden beneath loose boards. Dalton knelt and pried it open. A dark hole gaped beneath the barn. A steep ladder led down into blackness. Rachel's breath caught. That wasn't there before. "It was covered up," Dalton said grimly, "and from the look of it, it's been here for years." One of the deputies climbed down, flashlight in hand. His voice echoed up moments later. "Sheriff, you'll want to see this." Dalton and Simmons descended into the darkness. Rachel wanted to follow, but Tom held her back. "We need to stay here." She nodded, though her instincts screamed otherwise. When Dalton and Simmons emerged, their faces were pale and grave. "There's a room down there," Simmons said. "Concrete walls, no windows, a cot, chains bolted to the floor, and children's belongings." Rachel felt her knees weaken. Ellie and Emma had told the truth. They had been held beneath their own barn, but that wasn't the worst part. "There's another door down there," Dalton continued. "It leads to an underground passage. We don't know where it goes yet, but it's big enough for a grown man to use." Rachel's pulse raced. The man in the dark hadn't just kept her daughter's prisoner. He might still be out there. The sheriff's sirens broke the early morning silence as deputies raced down the gravel driveway to the Bennett farm. Rachel sat on the front porch, her arms wrapped protectively around Ellie and Emma, a heavy blanket draped over their tiny shoulders. The girls were too weak to stand. Their clothes hung in tatters and they shivered despite the blanket. Tom arrived moments later, tires skidding on the wet earth, his face drained of color when he saw the twins. He stumbled forward, fell to his knees and gathered them into his arms, tears streaking his weathered cheeks. I thought you were gone," he whispered hoarsely. Rachel nodded, unable to speak. Her relief was sharp and overwhelming, but beneath it stirred a colder, darker fear. What had happened to her daughters? What was this nightmare they had somehow survived? Sheriff Dalton, a broad-shouldered man with a grizzled beard and steady eyes, approached carefully. "Rachel, Tom, we'll need to take the girls to the hospital. They need a full medical exam. And then—" he lowered his voice, eyes flicking toward the girls. "Then we'll need to ask them what happened." Rachel's grip tightened. "They've been through enough." "I know." Dalton crouched down, speaking gently. "But we need to find out who did this, before he hurts someone else." Ellie stirred. She looked up at the sheriff with haunted eyes. "He's still watching." Dalton's jaw tightened. "Who, sweetheart? Who's watching?" But Ellie only pressed her face into Rachel's side and wouldn't speak another word. The hospital room smelled sterile and cold. Machines beeped softly as doctors examined the girls, checking for malnutrition, dehydration, and signs of trauma. Astonishingly, despite their thinness and bruises, both girls were alive. Weak, but alive. "It's a miracle," Dr. Patel murmured. 5 months missing in winter, and they survived. Rachel stood by the bed, one hand on each of her daughters. "They said someone kept them from coming back." Patel frowned. "We'll need to involve a child psychologist. They've been through a severe ordeal." A knock sounded at the door. Sheriff Dalton entered, accompanied by a young woman in a gray blazer. "This is Agent Kara Simmons, FBI. She's joining the investigation." Rachel's stomach clenched. "FBI?" Dalton nodded. "Given the time they were missing and the circumstances, it's bigger than local law enforcement." Agent Simmons approached the bed and crouched to meet the girl's eyes. She had a calm, warm presence, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Ellie, Emma, I know you're scared, but you're safe now. No one can hurt you here." The girls glanced at each other. Ellie spoke first, her voice barely audible. "He found us when we were hiding." Rachel leaned forward. "Who, baby?" "The man in the dark." Emma nodded, her lips trembling. "He was in the barn. We never saw his face. He wore black clothes. His voice was scratchy, like he couldn't breathe right." Simmons scribbled something in a small notebook. What did he do after he found you? He took us somewhere, Ellie said. It was really cold and smelled bad, like old water. Emma added, he made us stay in a room with no windows. We couldn't tell if it was day or night. Rachel's heart twisted. Her babies had been trapped in darkness for months. Simmons asked gently, how did you get back to the barn? Ellie's brow furrowed. Sometimes he wasn't there. We tried to open the door, but it was locked. Then a few days ago, he just didn't come back. We waited, Emma whispered, but he never came, so we found a way out. We ran and ran, we got lost, we came back to the barn to hide. We thought he might be following. Dalton and Simmons exchanged a grim look. How did you eat? Simmons asked softly. Ellie hesitated. He gave us food, sometimes canned stuff, crackers. Rachel felt sick. Some monster had kept her daughters alive just enough to prolong their suffering. But why? Dalton stood. I want to sweep the barn again. If he had access to the property once, he might have left traces. Tom spoke for the first time since. They arrived at the hospital. His voice was tight with controlled fury. We're coming with you. The barn felt different now, tainted. Rachel could almost feel the dark memories trapped in the wood and shadows. Deputies combed through every corner, while Simmons directed a forensic team. Rachel stood back, arms crossed tightly, while Tom followed the sheriff into the hay storage area. Nothing out of the ordinary so far, Dalton muttered. But Simmons wasn't satisfied. She walked the perimeter, flashlight slicing through the dim interior. Her beam landed on the spot where the hay bale had shifted. Here, she said. The deputies moved in, pulling away the remaining hay. Behind the bales was more than just the narrow gap Rachel had found. A small trapdoor lay hidden beneath loose boards. Dalton knelt and pried it open. A dark hole gaped beneath the barn. A steep ladder led down into blackness. Rachel's breath caught. That wasn't there before. It was covered up, Dalton said grimly, and from the look of it, it's been here for years. One of the deputies climbed down, flashlight in hand. His voice echoed up moments later. Sheriff, you'll want to see this. Dalton and Simmons descended into the darkness. Rachel wanted to follow, but Tom held her back. We need to stay here. She nodded, though her instincts screamed otherwise. When Dalton and Simmons emerged, their faces were pale and grave. There's a room down there, Simmons said. Concrete walls, no windows, a cot, chains bolted to the floor, and children's belongings. Rachel felt her knees weaken. Ellie and Emma had told the truth. They had been held beneath their own barn. But that wasn't the worst part. There's another door down there, Dalton continued. It leads to an underground passage. We don't know where it goes yet, but it's big enough for a grown man to use. Rachel's pulse raced. The man in the dark hadn't just kept her daughters prisoner. He might still be out there. The following morning dawned grey and heavy, clouds hanging low over the Bennett farm like a suffocating blanket. The news had already broken. Reporters swarmed the property line, cameras snapping, their voices shouting questions that Rachel refused to answer. She kept the twins inside, away from the circus. But there was no hiding from the truth anymore. The man in the dark had planned everything, built a secret prison beneath their barn, moved through underground tunnels like a predator. And if he could do that undetected for months, what else was he capable of? Sheriff Dalton had posted 2 deputies at the farm overnight. FBI agents had mapped out the hidden room and tunnel. The passage ran for nearly a quarter mile before ending at an old boarded-up well deep in the woods beyond the fields. Whoever had built it knew exactly how to avoid being seen. It must have taken years to dig that tunnel, Simmons said, standing with Rachel and Tom by the barn. He wasn't improvising. He planned this. Tom's face was like stone. So where is he now? Simmons shook her head. That's what we're going to find out. Inside the house, Ellie and Emma sat on the living room couch, wrapped in soft blankets. A child psychologist named Dr. Keller sat with them, asking careful, simple questions. Did you ever see where he went when he left the room? She asked, gently. Emma shook her head. Ellie hesitated. Once, I think I heard water dripping, like a cave. Rachel's stomach turned. Underground, hidden, just like the tunnel. Did he ever say why he took you? Keller pressed softly. Ellie, swallowed hard. He said we reminded him of someone. Emma clutched her sister's hand. His daughter. He said his daughter was gone, and he wanted us to be her now. Rachel's breath hitched. Simmons scribbled furiously in her notebook. We need to run every missing child in custody case from the last 20 years, the agent said. But Rachel wasn't listening. Her mind had locked onto a memory. Years ago, before Ellie and Emma were even born, a local man named Charles Reed had lost his family in a house fire. His wife and young daughter had died. The fire had been ruled accidental, but rumors had swirled that Charles had been mentally unstable before and after the tragedy. He'd vanished not long after the fire. Some said he'd moved out west. Others whispered darker theories. Rachel's voice trembled. I think I might know who the man is. Dalton and Simmons wasted no time. They pulled up old police records confirming Rachel's recollection. Charles Reed, former Maple Hollow resident. His daughter had been named Lila, only a year older than Ellie and Emma were now. After losing his family, Reed had spiraled into isolation and was reported missing in 2010. His property had been seized and left abandoned. No confirmed sightings since. It fits, Simmons muttered. His mental state, his disappearance, his knowledge of the area, and if he was obsessed with recreating his family. Tom's fists clenched. Where do we find him? That's the problem, Dalton said. We don't know where he's been living all this time. The underground room he built wasn't new. He's been around for years, watching, planning. Rachel shivered. He was here the whole time, right under our feet. Dalton nodded grimly, and he might still be nearby. That evening, as the sky darkened, the farm grew eerily quiet. The deputies patrolled the property in slow, careful loops. Simmons had requested infrared drones, but it would take until morning for them to arrive. Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat at the window in the girls' room watching the fields beyond. The barn loomed in the distance, a black silhouette against the moonlit sky. Then she saw it. Movement. At the edge of the woods near the old well, figure dressed in dark clothes standing still as a statue. Her breath caught. She grabbed her phone and dialed Dalton. There's someone outside near the woods. Stay inside, lock the doors, we're on our way. But Rachel couldn't wait. Not again. She grabbed Tom's old hunting rifle from the closet, checked the safety and slipped out the back door. The night air was sharp, full of the scent of damp earth. She crept toward the figure, rifle raised. Stop! She shouted. The figure didn't move. Her heart pounded. Every step brought back memories. The endless nights searching for her girls, the helplessness, the terror. Not this time. She closed the distance until the flashlight beam struck the figure full on. It was a scarecrow. Her breath whooshed out. She lowered the rifle, heart still racing. Then she noticed something pinned to the scarecrow's chest. A scrap of paper. Hands shaking, she pulled it free and unfolded it. You can't protect them. She's mine now, both of them. Rachel staggered back, bile rising in her throat. The man in the dark wasn't gone. He was watching, and he had no intention of letting the twins go for good. The deputies and Sheriff Dalton arrived minutes later, lights flashing and engines roaring up the dirt driveway. Agent Simmons joined them, her face tight with anger as Rachel handed over the note. The handwriting was jagged, letters pressed deep into the paper like they'd been carved more than written. He's taunting us, Simmons growled. He wanted you to find this. Dalton scanned the woods with a floodlight. Set up a perimeter. I want officers posted at every corner of the property. No one goes in or out without us knowing. Rachel stood rooted to the spot, the rifle still clutched in her hands. The cool night breeze carried the smell of hay, damp earth, and fear. She kept glancing toward the barn and the woods beyond, as if expecting the man to step out of the shadows at any moment. Tom came running from the house, breathless. Are the girls okay? They're still inside, Rachel said quickly. Didn't wake up. Simmons turned to her. Keep it that way. Don't tell them about the note. But Ellie and Emma already knew, even without the words. Rachel could see it in their faces the next morning. The fear, the exhaustion, the feeling of being hunted. At breakfast, Emma picked at her food and finally whispered, He won't stop. Rachel knelt beside her. He can't hurt you anymore. We won't let him. But Ellie shook her head. It's not just us. Rachel frowned. What? Do you mean? Ellie's eyes filled with tears. There were others. The room went silent. Tom set down his coffee mug, face pale. Others? Ellie nodded. We heard voices sometimes from the tunnel. Other kids, crying. Emma added. But then one day they stopped. Rachel felt her knees weaken. Simmons leaned forward. Urgently. Did you ever see them, the other children? No, Ellie said, but we know they were real. Dalton rubbed a hand over his jaw, his expression darkening. If this is true, we're not just dealing with a kidnapping. We could be looking at a serial abductor. Or worse, Simmons added. Rachel couldn't breathe. It wasn't over. It had never been over. Her girls had been lucky, or perhaps unlucky enough to survive. How many others hadn't? The FBI brought in ground-penetrating radar teams to scan the farm and surrounding woods. Rachel watched from the porch as machines rolled across the fields, mapping the earth beneath their feet. It didn't take long to find what they feared. Burial sites, at least 5 shallow graves hidden beyond the tree line. Simmons ordered the area sealed off while forensic teams began their grim work. Deputies searched every nearby abandoned property, old wells and root cellars. If Reed, or whoever the man truly was, had been active for years, there could be victims spread far beyond Maple Hollow. Rachel held her daughters close. She could feel the weight of the past pressing down, heavy as the storm clouds gathering overhead. The news spread fast. Reporters descended again, now calling it the Maple Hollow monster case. People who once offered sympathy now kept their distance, like the family had become cursed. Tom noticed it too. Our friends don't even look us in the eye anymore. Rachel nodded bitterly. They think the farm is a graveyard. But she didn't care what the town thought. All that mattered was protecting Ellie and Emma from the monster who had stolen their innocence, and stopping him from taking anyone. Hells, that night, as the rain began to fall, Simmons gathered Rachel, Tom, and Dalton inside the farmhouse kitchen. We believe Reed is still operating in the area, Simmons began, and he may have an accomplice. Rachel blinked. An accomplice? Simmons nodded grimly. The tunnel system, the room under the barn. He couldn't have built all of that alone, not without help, or at least someone looking the other way. Tom leaned forward, voice low. Who would help a man like that? Someone he trusts, or someone he's blackmailing. We're checking all former employees, contractors, even farmhands who worked here in the past. Rachel's blood turned cold. The farmhands. They'd hired dozens over the years. Most stayed a season or two and left. But one in particular stood out in her mind. Harold Price. Quiet. Always kept to himself. Good worker. But something about him had made Rachel uneasy even back then. He'd left suddenly 3 years ago. No notice. Simmons made a note. We'll find him. Dalton's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face hardening. The lab confirmed the handwriting on the scarecrow note matches old documents signed by Charles Reed. So it's him, Tom said darkly. Simmons nodded. But the question is, where is he hiding now? Rachel's mind raced. If he had tunnels under the barn, could there be more? She thought back to the old maps of the property. Many years ago, the farm had bordered on an unused section of state forest, dotted with abandoned mining shafts. She stood abruptly. The old mines. Dalton and Simmons exchanged a look. It's possible, Simmons said, and the rain could collapse them if we don't act fast. Dalton grabbed his radio. Let's move, we'll need backup and tracking dogs. Rachel gripped his arm. I'm going with you. Dalton shook his head. Too dangerous. But Simmons studied Rachel carefully. No, she should come. The girls might have described things to their mother they didn't mention to us. Details could be important. Tom rose. Then I'm coming too. No, Simmons said firmly. One parent needs to stay with the girls. Rachel's heart ached. She looked at Tom. He gave a small nod, eyes full of both fear and pride. Go, he said. Find him. The rain fell harder as they gathered at the tree line near the state forest. The dogs barked anxiously, pulling their handlers toward a narrow trail half hidden by overgrown brush. The search party followed. The dogs into the woods, flashlights cutting beams through the darkness. The forest swallowed them quickly. Trees loomed like sentinels. The wind whispered through the branches. Rachel kept close to Dalton and Simmons, heart racing with every step. 20 minutes in, one of the dogs began barking furiously. Its handler called out, "Over here, we found an entrance." They converged on a sinkhole barely visible in the undergrowth. Part of it had caved in from the rain, revealing a wooden support structure beneath. Simmons shone her flashlight inside. A tunnel. Rachel's breath caught. Dalton gestured to his deputies. "Let's go. Stay sharp." They descended into the darkness, weapons drawn. The tunnel stretched on, cold and wet, wooden beams groaning. Overhead, Rachel could hear it, the distant sound of dripping water, just as Ellie had described. Then, a faint sound. Footsteps, scraping, someone moving deeper inside. Dalton whispered, "He's here." Rachel's pulse roared in her. Ears, this was it. The man who had stolen her daughters, who had haunted their lives for 5 months, who had promised he wasn't done yet, and now he was trapped. The tunnel grew narrower the farther they advanced, the damp walls pressing in like the ribs of some ancient beast. Rachel's flashlight caught splinters of wood, rusted metal hooks and tattered bits of rope hanging like forgotten cobwebs. Each step felt heavier than the last. The dogs growled low, ears pinned back. Simmons signaled for silence, raising a clenched fist. They paused, breathless, listening to the shifting, hollow sounds ahead. Someone was definitely moving deeper into the tunnel, but it wasn't frantic. The footsteps were slow, steady, deliberate. Rachel's knuckles whitened around the flashlight. Fear tried to take root in her heart, but she crushed it down. She wouldn't be afraid. Not after everything her girls had endured. Not after everything they had survived. Sheriff Dalton whispered into his radio. "Perimeter team. The suspect is inside the tunnel system. He's on the move. Prepare to intercept if he breaks above ground." Simmons nodded to Rachel. "Stay close. If we lose visual contact, you turn around. Understood?" Rachel nodded. "I'm not leaving." The tunnel sloped downward suddenly, the floor slick with mud. In the beam of her flashlight, Rachel noticed old footprints, child-sized. Ellie and Emma's, traces from their escape. The girls had been here, had run through this darkness. Alone, terrified. She swallowed the lump in her throat and pressed on. Ahead, the passage widened into a crude cavern, the ceiling arched high overhead, supported by rotting timbers. In the center of the space stood a makeshift table covered with cracked jars, an old oil lantern, and a filthy child's doll missing its head. Rachel's stomach clenched. She recognized the doll. It had once belonged to Ellie. "He's been here recently," Simmons murmured. Dalton motioned toward a secondary passage leading out of the cavern. That's where he went. As they approached the new tunnel, Rachel spotted something that stopped her cold. Scratched into the wall in frantic, childlike scrawl were the words, "Help us." "He's taking more." Her breath hitched. "This isn't just about Ellie and Emma. He has more victims." Simmons paled. "And he's still taking them." Dalton's radio crackled. "Sheriff, we just got a 911 call. Another child missing. 6-year-old. Boy from the next county over. Parents said he disappeared during a backyard campout last night." Rachel's heart dropped like a stone. He wasn't running away. He was hunting. Dalton relayed the new information to the FBI command post. Simmons cursed under her breath, glancing down the dark tunnel ahead. "If he's got that boy, he won't be far." They quickened their pace, every second now a battle against time. As they pressed deeper, the air grew colder and heavier. Rachel could feel it, the weight of unseen eyes. She tightened her grip. On the flashlight, breath coming in shallow bursts. Then from the darkness ahead came a sound, a child's cry, faint, muffled. Rachel surged forward, but Simmons caught her arm. "Wait, we don't know if it's a trap." Dalton signaled the deputies to fan out, weapons raised. The team advanced cautiously into the next chamber. It was smaller than the last, walls slick with moss and grime. In the corner, bound by rope, was a small boy with dirty blonde hair, his face streaked with tears. Rachel gasped. "That's him, the missing boy." Dalton and Simmons moved in quickly. One deputy cut the ropes while Simmons scanned the shadows. "Where is he?" Simmons demanded. Softly. "Where's Reed?" The boy sobbed. "He said he'd be back for me soon." Rachel knelt, wrapping the boy in her arms. "You're safe now. We've got you." But a cold voice echoed from the darkness behind them. "Safe?" Rachel froze. The boy whimpered, burying his face against her shoulder. A figure emerged from the shadows. A tall man dressed in black, face hidden behind a filthy mask made from old burlap. His eyes glinted like glass in the flashlight beams. "You think you can take them from me?" the man rasped. His voice was raw, scratchy, exactly as Ellie and Emma had described. "They're mine." Dalton raised his weapon. "Charles Reed, it's over. Let the boy go and surrender." Reed chuckled, a hollow, terrible sound. "You can't stop this. I've been watching all of you for years. None of you even noticed." Simmons stepped forward. "This is your last chance. Put your hands up." Reed's gaze locked onto Rachel. "You should have been grateful. I took care of your daughters, kept them alive, fed them, loved them." Rachel felt fire boil in her blood. "You stole them. You tortured them. You don't get to call that love." Reed took a step closer. "They needed me." Dalton's voice hardened. "Don't move, Reed." But Rachel saw it, the flash of something metallic in Reed's hand. A blade. Everything happened at once. Reed lunged toward Rachel and the boy. Deputies shouted, guns raised. A shot rang out, deafening in the confined space. Reed staggered, the blade clattering to the floor. He collapsed against the damp wall, sliding down until he hit the mud. His mask slipped from his face, revealing hollow cheeks, wild eyes, and a twisted expression halfway between rage and relief. "I saved them," he whispered hoarsely. "I saved them from the world." Then his eyes went dull. His head lolled to the side. Sheriff Dalton lowered his gun slowly. The echo of the shot still rang in Rachel's ears. Simmons checked Reed's pulse and shook her head. "It's over." Rachel pulled the boy close, tears slipping down her face. It was over. But the scars Reed had left behind, on her family, her daughters, and now this boy, would last forever. The early morning light barely pierced the dense grey clouds as they emerged from the tunnel, the little boy cradled in Rachel's arms. Deputies and agents were already swarming the area. Stretchers were waiting. Medical teams rushed forward, voices a blur in Rachel's ears. Tom was there too, eyes wide with terror until he saw her. He ran toward them, pulling Rachel and the boy into a tight embrace. "Thank God, I thought—" "It's over," Rachel whispered. "He's dead." But the words felt hollow. Reed's death hadn't erased the horrors he'd caused. It hadn't unburdened the weight pressing down on her family for the past 5 months, or the years that would follow. Ellie and Emma came running as soon as they saw Rachel. Tom had kept them at the edge of the search area, guarded by officers. They flung themselves into Rachel's arms, sobbing into her jacket. "You're safe now," Rachel murmured over and over, unsure whether she was comforting them or herself. Sheriff Dalton and Agent Simmons stood nearby, speaking in low tones with their teams. Even as the crime scene expanded around them, tents going up, evidence bags piling, Dalton paused to approach Rachel. "You did it," he said quietly. "You brought him down." Rachel shook her head. "No, we did. You, Simmons, my girls, that boy." She nodded toward the child now being tended to by paramedics. "We all survived him." Dalton's face was weary but proud. "Not everyone gets that chance, but you kept fighting. That made all the difference." Simmons joined them, her expression serious. "There's something else." Rachel's heart sank. "What now?" Simmons lowered her voice. "The tunnel system he built. It connects to other properties. At least 2 abandoned homesteads we've identified so far, and some of the graves we found weren't fresh. They're old." Rachel closed her eyes, sick with understanding. "He's been doing this longer than anyone knew. We'll keep digging. We'll bring closure to the other families. But for you and your girls—" Simmons softened. "It's time to go home. Start healing." Rachel looked toward the horizon where the sun was trying, weakly, to break through the clouds. Healing. The word sounded distant, unreachable. But maybe, just maybe, It was possible. Over the next several days, law enforcement sealed off the Bennett farm. Search teams scoured every inch of the woods and tunnels. Forensic experts catalogued Reed's belongings, uncovering journals that chronicled years of obsession, grief, and madness. In one notebook, Reed had written page after page about Ellie and Emma. Two perfect replacements, better than the daughter I lost. They will love me once they forget their old lives. Rachel burned every page the moment the FBI allowed her to. Ellie and Emma never had to see the words. Meanwhile, the little boy, Noah Jensen, was reunited with his parents. They wept as they held him, the boy clutching his mother's hand like he would never let go. The news made national headlines. Maple Hollow monster dead after attempted abduction, foiled, twins and missing boy saved. People called Rachel a hero. Strangers sent flowers, cards, donations. But every night when the cameras were gone and the house was quiet, Rachel sat alone in the girl's bedroom, staring at the moonlit fields beyond. The shadows always returned. 3 weeks later, after law enforcement officially cleared the property, Rachel, Tom, Ellie and Emma moved back into the farmhouse. The barn had been torn down, Rachel's decision. "I don't want them ever seeing." "To that place again," she'd told Simmons. They tried to pick up where they left off, but everything had changed. Simple things, gathering eggs, walking the fields, playing hide-and-seek, were now colored by fear. Emma refused to go outside after dark. Ellie jumped at every creak of the floorboards. Rachel woke often in the night, heart pounding, convinced she'd heard someone moving in the hallway. Tom tried to be strong. He kept himself busy repairing the house, mending fences, planting new crops. But Rachel could see the cracks. The way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. Grief counselors came and went. Some helped, others made things worse, poking at wounds not yet ready to heal. And always the town watched from a distance. Some offered quiet support, others whispered behind closed doors. "That's the family from the monsters farm. How did they not know? How could they live above a dungeon and not suspect a thing?" The questions were cruel. But Rachel understood them. She had asked herself the same ones every night. One quiet evening, as the sky turned purple and the air smelled of fresh rain, Rachel found Ellie sitting alone on the back porch. Her daughter was staring at the empty space where the barn used to stand. Rachel sat beside her. "What are you thinking about, sweetie?" Ellie didn't answer at first. Then she said, "It's not fair." "What isn't?" "That he's gone. That—" "He can't be punished." Rachel took a slow breath. "He was punished, Ellie. He can't hurt anyone ever again." Ellie's small fists clenched in her lap. "But I still feel like he's here, watching." Rachel put an arm around her. "That feeling will fade, I promise." But even as she spoke, Rachel wasn't sure it ever would. Not completely. Summer edged into autumn. The corn turned dry and golden. Leaves blushed red and orange before tumbling to the ground. The Bennett farm, once the scene of horror, grew quieter. Birds returned to the trees. New calves stumbled through the fields. The world tried to pretend nothing had happened, but the shadows didn't let go so easily. Ellie and Emma had good days and bad. Some mornings they woke laughing and chasing each other as if they'd never been taken. Other days they refused to leave the house, even with both parents close by. Rachel and Tom learned to live in small victories. Rachel started homeschooling the girls. Crowds and strangers made them nervous. The classroom at Maple Hollow Elementary, once their happy place, now felt like a cage. One afternoon, as Rachel read aloud to them in the kitchen, Emma interrupted softly, "Can we get a dog?" Rachel and Tom exchanged a glance. Tom gave a small, hopeful nod. The next day they brought home a golden retriever puppy. The girls named him Rusty. He followed them everywhere, barking at shadows and curling at the foot of their beds each night. Rachel knew he couldn't chase away the nightmares. But he gave them something they hadn't had in a long time, a sense of safety. One crisp October morning, Agent Simmons returned to the farm. She'd been promoted after closing the Reed case, but stayed in touch, calling Rachel every few weeks to check in. Now she stood in the kitchen, a warm smile beneath sharp, watchful eyes. "The task force is shutting down," she announced. "We've recovered the remains of all known victims. No other tunnels or grave sites were found. Rachel felt relief ripple through her, followed by guilt. Relief for her daughters. Guilt for the families who had only found closure in death. Simmons lowered her voice. We also confirmed Harold Price, your former farmhand. He helped Reed build the original tunnel network. We arrested him in Ohio last month. He's in federal custody. Rachel sat down hard at the table. He worked here, ate at our table. Simmons nodded. He claimed Reed blackmailed him, paid him off, later. But he knew about the room. He knew children were taken. He chose to keep quiet. Tom clenched his fists. He should never see daylight again. He won't. Simmons opened her briefcase. But that's not the only reason I came. She slid a thin manila folder across the table. What's this? Rachel asked. FBI protocol requires victims' families be given full disclosure once a case is closed. Inside are the case files, photos, journals we recovered from Reed's lair. Rachel stared at the folder like it was a snake. I don't want to see those. I understand, you're not required to, Simmons said gently. But if the girls ever want to know, years from now, it'll be their choice. Rachel's hands trembled. She nodded, pulling the folder toward her and tucking it into the drawer beneath the kitchen counter. She'd lock it away. For now. Maybe forever. Simmons rose, gathering her coat. One last thing. Rachel stood as well. What is it? You asked me once how someone like Reed could go unnoticed for so long. Simmons looked out the window, eyes narrowed at the fields beyond. Most predators hide in plain sight. That's what makes them dangerous, and that's why you and your family are remarkable. Rachel frowned. Remarkable. You refused to stop searching. You trusted your instincts. You saved not only your daughters but another child, and helped close cases that would have remained unsolved for years. Simmons smiled faintly. That makes you stronger than him, stronger than the darkness. Rachel's throat tightened. She managed a quiet, "Thank you." Simmons touched her shoulder lightly. "If you ever need anything, call me." Then she was gone. That night, Rachel and Tom sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket as Rusty dozed at their feet. The girls were asleep upstairs, their bedroom window glowing softly with the nightlight shaped like a little barn, a gift from Tom to help them feel safe again. Rachel sipped her tea and looked out across the fields. The barn's absence was still a raw wound in the landscape. But the space left behind felt more like a scar than a hole now, something healed over, even if the pain remained. You ever think about moving? Tom asked suddenly. Rachel tilted her head. Leaving the farm? He nodded, starting fresh somewhere new, no bad memories. She thought about it. She'd thought about it 100 times. But no matter where they went, the memories would follow, the fear, the questions, the grief, and so would the strength they'd gained. This is home, Rachel said. We don't let him take that from us, too. Tom smiled quietly. That's what I thought you'd say. They sat in silence, listening to the crickets and the soft rustling of the trees. It wasn't peace, not fully, but it was enough. For now. The first snowfall came early that year. Thick, heavy flakes drifted down over the fields, softening the sharp edges of the farm's past. Rusty bounded through the snow like a puppy again, leaving paw prints alongside the girls' boots. Ellie and Emma were changing. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to carry the weight of memory, without letting it crush them. They still had nightmares sometimes, still jumped at sudden noises, but they also smiled more, laughed more. They ran through the snow without looking over their shoulders now. Rachel watched from the porch, wrapped in a heavy coat, a thermos of cocoa in her hands. Tom stood beside her, quietly repairing the broken swing that hung from the old oak tree. Every motion spoke of purpose, of staying, of reclaiming what had almost been lost. The barn's absence was still a scar on the landscape, but now it was also a reminder. They had survived. "Mommy!" Emma called, waving a stick high like a sword. "Come play." Rachel smiled. In a minute. For the first time in months, the invitation didn't fill her with fear. By Christmas, the town's whispers had quieted. Maple Hollow wasn't quick to forget scandal, but sympathy had begun to replace suspicion. The Jensens, the family of the little boy, Noah, visited often. The bond between their families was unspoken but unbreakable. They understood each other in ways no one else could. Rachel invited Simmons and Dalton over for Christmas Eve dinner. It felt right. They weren't just law enforcement anymore. They were part of the strange, painful family forged by those terrible months. Over dinner, Ellie surprised everyone by asking, "Can we donate some of our toys to the shelter kids?" Rachel blinked. "Of course, but why?" Ellie's eyes were steady, older than her years. "Because some kids might not get saved. We did, but we can help them even if just with toys." Tom looked down quickly, his throat working to swallow emotion. Dalton clapped a hand on Tom's shoulder. "You've got strong daughters." Rachel smiled. "Stronger than we'll ever be." New Year's Eve arrived cold and quiet. Tom and the girls went to bed early. Rachel stayed up watching the clock tick toward midnight. Rusty lay curled at her feet, snoring softly. At 5 minutes to 12, a knock sounded at the front door. Rachel froze. Every instinct screamed danger, but she didn't grab the rifle this time. She grabbed a flashlight and opened the door cautiously. It wasn't a stranger. It was an elderly woman, bundled in a heavy coat, snow gathering on her shoulders. "Mrs. Bennett?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes?" The woman glanced over her shoulder as if afraid to be seen. "I heard about what happened here, about the man who took your daughters. I think he took my granddaughter too, 15 years ago." Rachel's breath caught. The woman pulled a faded photograph from her pocket. A little girl with pigtails smiled up from the worn paper. "Her name was Megan. The police stopped searching after a year. I never stopped." Rachel's hands trembled as she took the photo. She recognized something in the child's eyes, a silent plea for someone to remember, someone to keep looking. "We found several graves," Rachel said quietly. "The FBI recovered remains. They didn't release all the names publicly, but they can tell you if your granddaughter was among them." The woman nodded, tears slipping down her wrinkled cheeks. "Thank you. For not giving up. For making him stop." Rachel hugged her gently. The woman clung to her like a drowning person to a lifeline. Even now, the ripples of Reed's evil were still touching lives, but so were the ripples of survival, of hope. At midnight, Rachel stood in the doorway, watching snow fall over the fields. The barn was gone. The tunnels were sealed. The man in the dark was dead. But the farm still stood. Her family still stood. Rusty barked softly, wagging his tail as Ellie and Emma crept sleepily into the living room. Tom followed, bleary-eyed but smiling. They gathered around Rachel as the clock struck 12. A new year, a new beginning. Rachel kissed each of her daughters, then Tom. "We made it," she whispered. Ellie nodded. "We did. And if any bad people come again," Emma finished for her, "we'll fight back. Together." Rachel held them all close, the cold night air swirling around them. Beyond the farm, darkness still existed. Evil still existed. But inside this house, in this family, light had taken root. And it wasn't going anywhere.